Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sachs, and this is my co-host, Elizabeth Goss, with the Monstrous Regiment. We are we are mothers of boys. Okay. Is abortion a women's issue? I'm Elizabeth Sachs, and this is my co-host, Elizabeth Goss, with the Monstrous Regiment. So what we're talking about today is abortion a female-specific sin or a sinful inclination? And as we fight for the abolition of abortion, should we fight it with that presupposition that it is mainly a women's issue? So, Lissa, I know one of the things we wanted to talk about to start with was the foundation of this attitude and this presupposition. I know that it's something that we often hear in the pro-life movement when anytime somebody posts something. I remember we used to see on the our Facebook pages, as we would post about abortion, people would leave comments like "keep your legs shut" or something like that.
Yeah, that's one of the more blatant ways that you see it, but you see it more subtly too. You won't see a comment about abortion at all that isn't about women. It's about the penalties that women should suffer, or it's about the choices that women make on both sides. Pro-choice people obviously think that it's something specifically that women need. And you kind of see almost a subconscious assumption that it's something women need and want on the pro-life or abolitionist side as well, where people are just thinking that even though you might need it, you shouldn't have it. Basically, you're saying put your child's needs before your own, which is true, except for in this case, the right thinking would say that your child's needs and your needs are the same, because it's not actually a net good for women, but we talk about it like it is a good thing that we should deny ourselves.
Right. Our presuppositions, I think, are based on the idea that abortion is, um, like you said, mainly having to do with women and women's needs or the baby's needs, and we pit the woman and the baby against one another. And so, like, on the pro-choice side, you have, well, the woman's more important. And then on the pro-life or abolitionist side, like, the pro-life side kind of tries to straddle the two, like they do with just about everything else. But the abolitionist side will then, like, defer in favor of the baby. So it becomes this false dichotomy where you're pitting two image bearers against one another and saying, well, one of them has got to lose out.
Right. And there are, since a child is more vulnerable than an adult, if they were pitted against each other, it'd be true that the child should win out. But it's not pitted against each other, because it's not something that is it's not something that women need, or that we're designed and created with the innate desire to do. Certainly, when we do desire it, it's not above and beyond what our partners and society also want for us.
Yeah. I think there's a certain amount to where, like, for instance, oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. I
Um,
apologize. I have to eat my lunch. I've been working all day.
go for it. Kate can edit this out. This little rings. Sorry.
Where'd you go?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Sometimes my phone kicks me off the internet.
Do you have like voice over IP or something?
No, it just started doing it. It's got some other problems with it too. We just need to get rid of our phone line. So anyways, where was I? I don't remember my train of thought.
I don't know.
Basically, I was trying to point at the fact that the pro-choice side assumes that abortion is a necessity for women to be able to be equal to men. Like they have this idea that women and men should be the same. And so like there's this equalizing thing that since men don't have to have consequences for sexual encounters, that women should have the ability to eliminate those consequences as well. Whereas like the abolitionist end of things will look at it in terms of and pro-lifers too, to some extent, that they kind of like
anymore.
Say again?
If there's even a difference anymore.
Right. But they'll look at it in terms of like it kind of like the scales tip towards woman or pregnancy, child, and I've seen those scales. I've seen things like men in the abolitionist movement have said things like, well, it's because of women's suffrage that
women
we have abortion.
I've seen women say it.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen women say and agree with that too.
Yeah, I would actually say that the pro-choice state is right that women and men need to be given equal responsibility for any children that are created. The answer to it is not to give women as little responsibility as men are typically given. It's to give.
Right.
You counter it by saying, wait, men should be accountable too, instead of saying, well, women are in a really vulnerable state, so they should be less accountable. And that's where so often the left will get the problem right, but the answer wrong. Whereas the right will get the, they get everything wrong. Sometimes but yeah, the right answer, but for the wrong reason, or like with this, abortion is wrong, right answer, but then it's wrong because, and then that's where they kind of lose.
Yeah, it's wrong because feminists.
Right, it's wrong because we can't let women do what they want, which is not why it's wrong and not what we want. Yeah, we're kind of losing the thread, but yeah. I think we've both seen people literally go so far as to say there wouldn't be an abortion holocaust in this country if women didn't have the vote, which is just, I mean, it's ignorant of history. It's ignorant of, it's kind of America-centric, where we forget about other abortion holocausts in other countries. We can get more into that later, but it's just an attitude that it's Knoxian. It's that it goes right back into women are the port and gateway to the devil. And this idea that if women were restrained, nobody would want to do anything bad.
Right. Ultimately, the idea is that women do not have the right to have self-government. The pro-choice movement says women should have self-government, but they should have self-government to murder their child. And the abolitionist movement, pro-life movement, will tend towards women shouldn't have self-government. Who would give women self-government? Why would we do that? They'll go and murder their kids if we give them self-government instead of treating it in terms of... Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. What they both agree on is that the end result of women having self-government necessitates that we'll definitely want to murder our children. I mean, that's pro-choice, pro-life. They're in complete agreement that what women will do if left to our own devices is kill our kids. And that male oversight is what keeps women from killing their kids, which is demonstrably not true, because unregenerate men love abortion at least as much as unregenerate women, because it allows for exploitation, objectification without consequence. It hides rape and incest. I mean, it's been practiced. Child sacrifice, where that didn't happen inside of a woman's body, has been practiced by civilizations for thousands of years. And it wasn't like men holding their women back and being like, please don't throw my baby into the fire.
Right. And one might even say, so like we look at the SBC scandal that's happening right now, where all of these men were in leadership and they were engaging in sexual misconduct. I think a lot of it was likely rape, from what I've read. Mm-hmm. And a lot of abortions where there were men in leadership of the SBC who were raping women and then pushing them to have abortions to cover up that sin. So like it's unregenerate men, but abolitionists see people at the clinics who say, I'm a pastor's daughter, I'm dating a pastor or whatever their thing is. We see them and we know that they're in the context of the church still choosing to have an abortion. So we shouldn't be surprised when some of those unregenerate men who love abortion are men in the church as well. Men right. Even in leadership in the church. And I don't right. think the SBC in any way, shape, or form is an island unto itself on this. I think that if we look hard enough, we will find other churches, evangelical, Catholic, that are doing the same thing. They're using child sacrifice to cover up sin. And the men in power love that they have that option. And I right. think that's partially what pushes the regulation thing that we hear from the pro-life movement a lot. Like we should... I hear so many pro-lifers like online will say stuff like, I'm in groups with women seeking abortions, and I've heard women in there say, oh, I'm pro-life, but, then I needed an abortion. I'm still right. pro-life, but, you don't really know until you need one.
Right, because it plays into, because basically stuff like that confirms the pro-choice narrative that a lot of people who are anti-abortion actually just want to control women. Because what people mean when they say the reason they just want to regulate it is because what they want is to keep the slutty people from doing it or the trashy people from doing it. Not the people who might really, really need one. Not the people who are good but made a mistake. Not the people who, not the powerful people. Because abortion is eugenics. And so we want to make sure that the right people are getting them. We don't want to actually not have them at all. And that's, just the idea that it's some sort of female specific desire and that we invented child sacrifice. Women and men both want to avoid responsibility. Women and men both have reason to fear situations that they don't know how to overcome.
Right.
Women and men are both subject to cultural brainwashing, and there is not there's not an unregenerate man around who is like, well, there are some, but it's very common and it's very well known that men pressure women to have abortions all the time. And even sort of the more modern attitude of oh, it's your body, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That just leaves a huge gaping window for men to not take any responsibility one way or the other. They get completely out of getting to parent. They avoid the blessing of parenting that they think is a curse.
Right.
And they don't even have to make the decision. They get to completely wash their hands of it and be like, oh, it's her. And we think of that as some sort of victory of evil women over men, that we're the ones who end up making the choice. That's right. Just the exact same flip side of carrying the baby to term, is that it comes down to pregnancy as a women's responsibility. And that's another thing that both sides tend to agree on. Pregnancy is basically a woman's responsibility.
Yeah, ultimately, I think there's a calculated abdication on the part of men when it comes to this type of thing. So it's much easier to deal with abortion when you put it into the box of a woman's issue, because then a whole half of the population doesn't have to take responsibility for things that they should be taking responsibility for, or taking joy in things that God has given them either.
Right. And it just makes it really easy to categorize, and people who the segment of the population that just hates women and don't want us to get anything we want can be like, see, they like killing babies, we hate them even more. And then the segment of the population that is preoccupied with women's rights to the exclusion of the rights of children can make a big, loud complaint about how they don't get to kill their kids. And then there can be this sort of clash, this sort of tension that looks like a clash, but it's actually holding up the whole system like a tension rod.
Right.
And it supports the whole thing. So we're never ever going to abolish something if we continue to fight it on the terms of we have to keep women from getting what they want because they're the port and gateway to the devil, which is basically not a lot of people put it that way, although I've encountered some who do.
Yeah.
But it's the sort of unquestioned, unconscious assumption that underlies all of the rhetoric about it from on both sides. And it overlooks the fact that abortion has taken, like forced abortion is it's common in almost any kind of tyranny. Absolutely common. It has nothing to do with, government, societies, anywhere that they want eugenics, want to control what kind of people are born, want to control the population, want to control the number of people, whether it's China, whether it's the Church of Scientology, whether it's just the tyrannical government of a small family where the stepfather is a rapist.
Right. It's no accident that abortion thrives in tyranny and collectivism, where there's this idea of, in order to prop up the system, we need to sacrifice some of these little people on the side. Like this, it's propped up by that because it is of that. It feeds on the idea that the collective will be better off if the tiny little people just are gotten rid of and murdered.
Margaret Singer, like referred to us. But yeah, when we look, it's easy in our society because we've chosen to frame our abortion holocaust as a woman's choice, to look at it and say, well, it's a thing that women get to do. I saw somebody who I actually like and respect and is usually pretty right on about things say 100% of women are complicit in, I'm not 100% of women, 100% of abortions involve a complicit woman, which isn't true. It's not true. But it's easy to imagine that in our culture because pro-life people and abolitionist people have actually bought into the pro-choice idol, which is that abortion is something that women need and want. And so we can look at it, but to do that, we have to overlook thousands of years of history and it may be that in the many cases in our country, a woman is more culpable because she did it without her husband's or boyfriend's or the father's knowledge or whatever. But to say that that's because of something to do with her femininity, something to do with her being female, is to overlook all of history, because the impulse to child sacrifice knows no gender. And we can see that in other contexts when we're sacrificing born humans, and when we're sacrificing humans, when the government is sacrificing humans, and when Hitler is sacrificing humans, and when,
Right.
But we forget about that. We get very narrow and very sort of Western centric in our thinking about it. And we've all bought into the other side's logic. I think that might be my Facebook weakness. We've all bought into the other side's logic that women need and want abortion in a way that men don't. It's not that women are innocent and don't want it, and it's a horrible thing men are doing to us. Lots of women do want it, but it's nothing to do with them being women. It's everything to do with them being selfish, lost, depraved human beings across the board, if that's making...
No, that makes plenty of sense. It has to do with sin nature. It has to do with people who love themselves more than they love their neighbor. And it doesn't matter what the sex of that person is. Ultimately, the foundation of it is the decision to love sin more than to love death, or to love hate more than to love justice or mercy.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a decision to fear. It's a decision to trust yourself. But it's not always a decision that a woman makes for herself. It's usually a decision in our culture that one of the parents makes, or both of the parents makes, but it's not always the mother who's the one parent who makes it.
Right.
And I know it's not popular in some of our circles to admit that such a thing as coercion and force exists or is relatively common, but I've personally been out of the clinic and seen someone who I knew was underage, knew was not there by choice. I've called the police. There's nothing that I could do about it. Planned Parenthood doesn't report it. The abortion clinics don't report it. And I've seen that on multiple occasions. So it's not, you know, when we talk about it in legislation and stuff and about penalties, we have to be really careful to talk about parents, decision-making parents or grandparents if the person's underage, because this is a choice that both parents are responsible for.
Right. And I think that your experience is not unique, because I've seen how many abolitionists post on social media with alarming regularity. We were at the clinic. We saw a young girl come in. She obviously doesn't want to be there. She's obviously being pressed by her grandma, grandpa, boyfriend, whoever.
Right.
So it's definitely not something that is unique to your experience. Anybody who goes and does clinic ministry has seen this at least once.
Obviously apparent to us. We don't know who is there where they look willing and their husband is back home with another child threatening to hurt them if they don't do it. Or we don't know what situations where there's coercion to the point where, like, we always want to make it such a hard line of culpability. Either they're 100% conscious, knowing murderers, or they've been forced to the point of the drawing of blood and someone's dragging them in, kicking and screaming. But you can be culpable with that and still be under coercion. Of course, we are responsible for the choices we make, even when we're under coercion, but that's no reason to completely dismiss the factor of coercion at all.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of women who are afraid not to have an abortion.
And this is something that our society acknowledges in other contexts. How many TV shows have you seen where somebody's in a position where they're, you could probably write 10 scenarios off the top of your head right now. A father is being told his daughter is being held kidnapping if he doesn't go and assassinate said political figure or something like that.
That's so like not typically the reason for an abortion, but yeah.
But I mean, like, these are the types of stories that we see in our culture in different mediums. So we obviously know that these types of situations exist, and we wrestle with that, the morality of that, as we're watching a TV show or reading a book, but we completely ignore the reality of it when we have it before us in terms of a woman walking into an abortion clinic.
Right. And I'm not saying that it justifies it if there is any element of choice involved for her at all. What I'm saying is that when we ignore that and we act like this is just this thing that women do when they're unrestrained by the oversight of men who want the best for everyone all the time, we ignore the fact that this is being done at the urging of men or by the coercion of men. I'm not saying like men are bad and women are good. I'm saying unregenerate people hurt those who are weaker than them or more vulnerable than them, whenever it benefits them to do so. And so when we act like this is something that unregenerate men or just like would fight to the death to keep from happening if only the women couldn't vote or something ridiculous like that, we're ignoring the fact that even in things that we all agree are selfish, like doing it to keep a job or something, men don't have to worry about losing their job if they get pregnant, if their girlfriend or wife gets pregnant. That's a vulnerability and a concern unique to women. And so it doesn't make women inherently more selfish that they have a concern that other people don't have to worry about, that they take into account as a factor when they are when they're feeling pressure to do something. That doesn't mean it's justified to do it because of that pressure, but it means that it's not something that's it means it's not a desire unique to their special woman's sin or whatever Knox would call it.
Right. Which I think segs into, you were talking about how people assume that a pregnancy is a woman's problem, right, and they put it in that box. And I know you and I have had our own experiences with that as well. I don't know 100% of your story. So maybe you can share first.
Oh, okay. So I know that you have I lost my screen where I could see you. Sorry. I know that you have. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay. I know that you have a story from a church perspective where it was looked at that you are basically the responsible party for being pregnant. My unwed pregnancy was in high school as a high school student, and my experience was that if you were pregnant and you didn't have an abortion, you were a slut. And if you were pregnant and had an abortion and people knew about it, you were a slut. But sluttiness wasn't determined by how much you slept around. It had to do with whether or not you got pregnant and people knew about it. So I had pretty much the same boyfriend all the way through high school. I didn't get around. I didn't have much of a reputation, at least not a true one. But as soon as I was pregnant, the rumors flew. I lost a ton of friends. People wouldn't speak to me. Meanwhile, my boyfriend, who eventually would become my abusive ex-husband, he's in another school. And the people who know about it, it's like getting him new other girls who think it's like really kind of cool, and they're going baby clothes shopping with him, and he's still like a big basketball star, and there's nothing in any way about the treatment of him that's like ew, pregnant. Whereas I basically just disappeared as far as my little microcosm culture at the time was concerned, except in the eyes of a few people, kind of not the ones you would expect, to be honest. But the real attitude is, if you're pregnant, that's icky, that's gross, that's something that you shouldn't have let happen. And it was entirely on me, even though everybody in our entire small town knew who the father was.
But the responsibility rested on you.
Yeah, he wasn't even really considered in the equation. It was just, she got pregnant.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar. Because even from the church perspective, early on, when I went to a crisis pregnancy center, I was never even considering an abortion. They still counted me as, anyways. Right. But even then, she gave me the talk. Yeah. She gave me the talk, and she told me, like, I don't want you to, be doing this, and meaning fornication. And then later we were engaged to be married. His grandmother actually got a little tipsy at a family gathering and said to him, it's not too late. You can hightail it. I don't want you trapped in this. That was the response to him. You can hightail it. I don't want you trapped in this. The response to me, though, was, what are you going to do about this pregnancy? What are you going to do about this baby? I had members of my family saying, are you going to put this baby up for adoption? I know abortion's out of the question. Hint, hint. So, and it was never, to the two of us, it was ours. We shared this. Right. This baby was ours. And then later, after we had gotten married and we wanted to be on staff for the youth group, I was asked to apologize in front of the youth group for having been pregnant out of wedlock. My baby was like 2 years old at the time. We were married, but the youth leaders felt that this should be addressed, and they felt that I was the one to address it. So I had to apologize for being pregnant. Whereas there were other people who the leadership were aware were living together prior to marriage, were unfaithful to their spouses, and then placed in leadership. All of these things were happening in the same church. None of them were asked to apologize. None of them were asked to get up before the church and repent for their sins. Just me.
Right. Yeah, pregnancy is kind of gross. It's kind of icky, and it's definitely the woman's fault. And it's definitely her responsibility. And my ex-husband's family said the same kind of things of like, how do you know it's even yours? She's just trying to trap you into marriage. I was like, no, not really. Like, you know,
Yep.
um,
I do know.
the assumption, like, I don't know, does everybody think that their like little baby boy is like the Prince of England or something, that we're all like trying to set a net to trap some white trash kid from Carson City? Yeah, I was really hoping to get married. Like,
but the assumption is that obviously the girl must be doing bad to get pregnant.
Right. And that's, I mean, and the reason that we're both staring it from both sides is because it's the assumption, it's another thing that both sides agree on. Pregnancy is a women's issue, but pregnancy is not a women's issue because no woman has ever gotten pregnant all by herself. Not even women who have a baby by themselves by artificial insemination or IVF, they still didn't provide all the DNA all by themselves. That's not possible, at least currently. It's never happened.
And also viewing it that way, viewing pregnancy as a woman's problem, is ultimately contributing to the dehumanization of the baby. Because, and so in that sense, the abolitionist and pro-life side, when they say stuff like, it's not your husband, or it's not your body, it's your husband's body.
I know.
Or something like that. They're contributing to a culture of dehumanization that still is propping up abortion even while they're fighting it. And so like they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Right.
When they have
people who use the word abolitionist about themselves think that another person can own someone, then they are no kind of abolitionist. They're not working towards the abolition of anything. They're not working to preserve the image of God in human beings, because whether you think that a woman can own her baby to the point where she's allowed to kill it, or whether you think that a man owns his wife or his daughter, or whether you think that a plantation owner owns a slave, you are not in favor. You don't have any respect for the regard for the image of God in his creation, and you cannot inconsistently fight. Even if you think abortion's bad, you're not fighting against it.
Right. Like you said, we're adopting the pro-choice logic. We're looking at it in the same framework. We're just taking the opposite stance while we're in the same box.
The pro-choice attitude is you can't punish women with a baby. And the pro-life attitude, or the abolitionist attitude, even when the lip service is different, is yes, you can. She deserves the punishment. Nobody's attitude is that it's not a punishment. Nobody's attitude is, even when you're saying that baby is an image bearer of God, when your attitude is, and your mom deserves to be punished by you, you're not fighting for that baby as an image bearer of God. You're fighting for that baby as a consequence that slutty people deserve.
Yes. So talking about the woman's body, this is like the contention thing. Like we said about, somebody said, no, it's your husband's body or your father's body while somebody was going to the abortion clinic. So like both sides focus on that. The pro-choice side says, it's your body, your choice. And then the pro-life, sometimes abolitionist side will say, well, it's the location where abortions take place. But the point is, her body is a place of greater vulnerability. Like we were talking about the coercion before. When you're pregnant, you're very, very vulnerable.
Right. Yeah. The fact that abortion takes place inside of a woman's body, and that unlike the child sacrifice that we've seen historically, it's something that happens to a child that cannot be seen or touched outside of his mother or her mother, makes it feel like it's a woman's issue. But to the same degree that women in one way have more control over whether the child sacrifice happens, kind of, they also are they have more reason to fear. They're in a much more vulnerable condition because they're the ones that are having to carry the baby, getting to carry the baby, however you want to look at it. I mean, children are a blessing, but pregnancy is not always.
It's hard sometimes.
It's not always. Pregnancy is the sacrifice that you make for that blessing, unless you're one of the lucky ones. But we are the ones that are left with the responsibility. Child support is like nothing. It's like the tiniest possible amount. It's nothing. It's like people who think that women get pregnant to trap men into paying child support is like, what do you think economics is? It doesn't make any economical sense. It's going to cost me a lot more than I'll ever get from you.
Right.
Assuming that I can even compel payment.
Which you can't.
It's the cultural, religious, social, and just subconscious expectations are all primarily on the mother. And you okay?
You okay, sweetie?
I'm fine.
Okay, just come sit down.
It just hurt.
Okay. She's okay.
So to the degree that I forgot my train of thought. I know I said that the expectations were on the mother, but I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, the next thing on the outline is we must reject the idea that the hard line on abortion as murder necessitates a rejection of compassion or acknowledgement of for the pain and fear and coercion and brainwashing that pregnant women may experience.
Right.
Hold on just a sec. Isaiah, turn around and go back upstairs. Yes, Mama.
Sarah just turned up. You look that when you're listening to music and she's turning on music.
Okay. Why don't you go sit down and play with your Play-Doh? Yes, Mama.
Oh, I just want to stay down here back there.
It's fine, Mama. I got this.
Hi.
Okay. You need to go and go work on your Play-Doh.
I just want to talk to her.
She's eating her lunch.
I know. After when she's done, that means I can talk to her. I just want to talk to her after when she's done eating her lunch.
Listen. She and I have to finish our work, and then you may come down and you may look into the camera. I'll let you have some time with photo booth, okay?
I just want to wait here for a while.
Okay, but you have to be very quiet, and you cannot talk, or we will have to send you away. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am. Can you ask me after when you need me to talk?
Okay, but you have to be quiet until then. And this is going to be a very long time. You will get very bored.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
That's okay. So I think basically what we're looking at is that the pro-choice side looks right.
You're not going to hear her. She's not on there. I have her in my ears. Maybe you should just go upstairs and ask Sarah to turn on another movie. Say yes, Mama.
But you won't.
Do it, please.
Remember the last time when she didn't turn off the TV?
Right, I do.
So that means...
Did you go get your dessert out of the cabinet?
No.
Go ahead. Go get your dessert and take it upstairs with you.
Okay.
It's next to the cereal.
Yeah, no. Show her the dessert first.
Be quiet and no jumping. Emma, go upstairs and ask Sarah if she can turn another movie back on so everybody can stay in my bedroom, please. Yes, Mom.
Also, Mom, where's the tablet?
I'm not giving it to you now.
What?
Yes, Mom.
Well, when?
After I'm finished.
Or maybe at 3 o'clock.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Alyssa. This is why 10 o'clock.
I understand.
This is a grand idea.
I understand. So I think that what we're looking at is that the pro-choice side is right to say, well, the women are in a much more vulnerable position. The problem comes in with their solution being, well, people in a more vulnerable position need...
I want the shower.
Isaiah, go upstairs now. Yes, Mom. Take it upstairs.
Wait, if I squish it, that means it makes a sound like this.
Do I need to take it away?
No.
Then please take it upstairs with you now. Quickly.
I need to open it.
Okay, I'll be done just soon. Please go upstairs. I'll be done soon. I will.
Can you?
Ask Lala to take a turn.
She won't.
Go ahead.
Can I? Can you use my phone?
Yeah, you can take the puffs up. Go ahead.
I need to go get them. So he'll see. I know that's right. And
She's getting your puffs. It's okay. One at a time, and don't give him another one until he has.
Yeah, I use one to make him open his mouth. So I can see.
Okay, good. That's fair. Just put the bar in one pocket. Don't take the whole box up. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I will be done soon. Okay.
When you're done,
It's just the more interruptions we have, the longer it will take. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. It is. You may have to go back and repeat that because he came in and interrupted you epically in the middle of it.
Hopefully we're getting close to done.
We are close to done, I think.
Okay. So I think that what we have is a problem where the pro-choice side rightly sees, hey, women are more vulnerable in this area. And the solution is the problem where they think, well, if you're more vulnerable, then the way to balance that out is to give you an extra privilege, an extra right, where you can sort of make yourself less vulnerable by making your situation the exact same as men, where you will not have to be subject to the way your own body works. You won't have to be subject to anything that they're not subject to. And instead of coming back with the right answer of no, men need to make themselves more accountable, commensurate with the extra vulnerability of the people they've impregnated, we say or not we, but the pro-life or the abolitionist side or the anti-abortion side will say either no, they're not more vulnerable and kind of act like that's not real, even though it self-evidently is, or basically act like, yeah, and they deserve it. That's why women need men to rule over them.
Right. The appropriate response would be compassion instead of overall dehumanizing everybody in the situation or picking which person to dehumanize. It would be compassion for each human being in that situation, urging the adults in the situation to love and care for the more vulnerable child, but then also urging the men in the situation to love and care for the more vulnerable vessel, both the woman and the child. And the thing is, we need to be a living rebuke to you don't have a uterus, you can't say anything. Not just a verbal rebuke to that. We can't just hold signs that deal with that or hand out pamphlets that deal with that. We also have to be a living rebuke to that. We have to be men and women stepping in to help that vulnerable person in very, very real ways. You know, the abolitionist movement has always had the two modes, agitation and assistance. And I kind of feel like assistance does not get the attention that it should on this particular point.
Well, right. It used to be that there were two great objects, and one of them was ending the objectification of women. That's gone out of the door.
Passion.
And there were two modes, agitation and assistance. Assistance has gone out the door. But aside from like even what we do, we need to be seeking to create a society that holds men accountable, holds fathers accountable, holds adult parents of minor pregnant children accountable, where they don't get that free pass. Instead of saying we need to extend the free pass to the woman too, we need to say no, nobody gets the free pass, especially if you cause that pregnancy without the consent of the other person. So instead of saying women need this because they might get raped, if you not only can't hide your rape by forcing an abortion on your victim, but you also are financially responsible for somebody that you're never going to be allowed to have any contact with ever, which would be the just way to handle that.
Right.
Forever. and not just to the extent that a normal father would be, but in terms of restitution above and beyond what you would have to do for a child that was fathered in love instead of forcibly, but actually having to make restitution for your crime, not just take responsibility for it. That would be a deterrent to rape, and that would be holding people accountable other than the innocent child. That's the rape exception that we need.
Right.
But there's a kind of an attitude, particularly in the circles you and I have run in, that if we take a hard line and say that abortion is murder, we cannot in any way acknowledge the legitimate fear that a pregnant woman with an unplanned pregnancy is going to be experiencing. We can't have any compassion for that. We can't show any grace for that, because if we do that, then we're saying that it's okay, that she's a victim. Like, or if we acknowledge that she is in some ways a victim, then we're saying that she's the victim of abortion. And you can take a harsh line on whether or not an action is justified, and at the same time show compassion for the people in the situation that might make them feel scared not to do it. And in fact, in order to, with unweighted equal measures, without partiality, take that hard line, you have to be able to also show the compassion. Otherwise, your hard line looks like, and kind of is, just an effort to control women.
Right. It is.
And birds stayed all the way up.
One of the things that we discussed was like,
Need any trouble? That means I'm coming downstairs.
all right, I'll let you know if I have any trouble, buddy. Do we want to discuss the parallels between the Old South and the North previous to the Civil War?
Are you talking to me, or is that your...
He's upstairs now. I bribed him.
Well,
Kate
no, I
is
know.
going
I just wasn't
very
sure if
interesting
you were addressing
audio.
me directly, or if that was your on-screen segue.
No, I'm addressing you directly. Do you want to discuss those parallels?
Yeah, I was just waiting for the conversation to like open up so that we can naturally sort of transition to that.
So you just finished up talking about the women's body being more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I only heard some of that.
Well, I was talking about how we can't fight it without showing compassion. We actually can't take that hard line without showing compassion.
Right.
How many trains are there?
Lots of trains, and they're like maybe 200 yards from my house. I always live near trains. I do not know how or why, but I do.
I don't know. That's like a big, sort of hard to explain topic, and this has already taken a long time, so I wonder if we should just...
Right. We can move on to, if we fight abortion with women despising attitudes, we will never abolish it.
Yeah, I think so.
And if we can fit the North and South thing in there, we can.
Yeah, we could maybe like reference it sideways, but I don't know if we can make a whole thing of it.
I think we could probably do that.
I'm getting a lot of work emails.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So anyways, well, I think that going from the woman's body into that is a good thing. I'm just going to wait for this train to go. I'm sorry about my children making this take longer.
That's okay.
Isaiah seems to be the most difficult one to curb.
Yeah.
He's Mr. Energy. Okay, the train's almost gone. Is it still noise polluting really bad?
Not too bad.
Okay. So, I think for us to, talking about the two modes, agitation and assistance, if we can't acknowledge the reality of the issues that we face, if we can't acknowledge the reality of a woman's body being more vulnerable when she's pregnant, the reality of her baby being vulnerable, and how that changes how we approach both prosecution of abortion as murder and how we approach assistance to mothers, then I think that that's going to severely hamper our ability to abolish abortion. And even more so, if we despise women, we're not going to view that rightly. We're not going to view prosecution rightly. We're not going to view compassion rightly when they find themselves in a situation where we need to be compassionate. Maybe there is rape or incest, or maybe it's just a situation where she has made sinful decisions, or maybe she's been abandoned by her husband, or if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, you just cannot fight a you can't fight a battle using the same weapon that you're fighting against. You cannot fight dehumanization with more dehumanization. You can't fight the dehumanization of children with the dehumanization of men. And if what you're trying to combat is this evil thing that evil women want to do because women are the port and gateway to the devil, then you're not fighting abortion. You're fighting women. And you're fighting to control them instead of fighting to abolish the universally by men, women, and government embraced behavior of child sacrifice. If your real enemy is women, you will never win this war. You're not even fighting the same war. You're fighting on the side that you think you're fighting against.
I think that goes into the changing hearts and minds.
I'm losing you. Did you freeze up? And she's gone.